Alright, so this is our CDMA iPhone 4, Verizon Sprint, any CDMA variant. This is our put together reassembly video for that. You might have not disassembled your phone this far if you're only replacing a vibrator assembly or a speaker housing or something of that sort. Just fast forward to where you need to be to reassemble your phone from that point. And if you're replacing the digitizer assembly, this is where you need to be. We're going to start with that. So we've got our new assembly here. What we're going to do is you're going to slide these cables through the opening. And you want to be careful, the second cable will crimp up very easily. You need to make sure when you're putting those in that cable doesn't get stuck. And when you're lining up the top brackets, just with your other finger, make sure these cables are coming through smoothly. The way to tell if these are inserted right is they should be about the same length once you get the top brackets in. And then you're just going to slide that. Make sure all the brackets line up. You're going to want to make sure that the brackets on the inside are on the outside of the washers, not the inside. The way to tell if this assembly is on correctly, look at the edges here. And they should be flush all the way around the phone. If they're not, you probably have a bracket caught up on a washer or in a corner. You might need to use your pry tool to work with those or push them on the right side of the washer and just make sure that the frame is flush before moving on with reassembly. So now that we've got everything's flush, everything looks good. You push the home button, works all right, it's flush with the assembly. Now we're going to tighten the 6 washer screws that we had loosened previously to hold that assembly in place. And whenever you're putting screws back in, don't tighten them to the point where they're extremely tight. You just want to be snug, because if you tighten them too much, you're going to see that you're going to start to strip the screws, and if you ever have to take the phone apart again, you're going to have a hard time getting those screws out. So you just want them to be snug. So we've got these 6 screwed back in, and now we're going to pause. What we're going to do is we're going to replace the 4 corner screws that hold in the rest of the LCD digitizer assembly. Okay, so we've replaced the LCD digitizer assembly that's screwed in. We've got all 6 washer screws tightened down. We've got all 4 corner screws back in. Now we're going to want to replace our speaker assembly in the bottom of the device. So you're just going to want to set that back in there. And one thing I do want to make note of, is if you can see this, there are 4 little teeth that have to be pushed below. So use your pry tool, gently apply pressure, and you're going to want to make sure that these little teeth are on the inside of the frame. If you break off one, it's not a big deal. If you break off more than one, it might be a little bit of a big deal. So you just want to be careful that you don't break those and gently work them inside the frame. So now they're all on the inside. Now hold it down with one hand, and with the other hand, you're going to want to replace the right and left hand screws. And remember, the left one, you're going to need to replace that little black triangular spacer. Otherwise, it's not going to hold down your speaker assembly the way it should. This phone is missing that piece because it's a test phone, so I'm just replacing the screw, but you guys will be putting that spacer in place before putting the left hand screw back. Okay, so that screws in place. Now we're going to replace the vibrator assembly, and as you can see, this is a perfect example of why you need that spacer. It does not sit flush if you don't have that spacer. It's not going to mess with the functionality of the phone, but it's better if you have that spacer in there. To replace the vibrator assembly, all you're going to do is there's a tiny little screw hole right here. You're going to line that up with the screw hole that sits in the mid-frame. And you just want to make sure this part with the coils is flush with the bottom part. If you don't get that in there straight, your phone won't vibrate. So just want to make sure that's sitting in there right. Just push it down to make sure the adhesive is in there. And now we're ready to place the logic board back in the device. So we're going to want to make sure this little plastic grounding clip is on top. Place that back on there. And to do this, typically what I do is I want to make sure that there are no cables in the way. So these two you might need to fold down a little bit into the frame. Your LCD digitizer cables, if that's what you're replacing, they may be a little stiff, so you'll need to bend them a little bit. And then what we're going to do is we're going to replace this. Hold these cables out of the way with your hand and gently push this over to the right so you can line it up with the frame. And you just want to be gentle when you're doing this. So you're just going to position the logic board in here, and this might take you a couple tries. It's not the easiest piece to get in the world. Just make sure that you don't get any cables stuck underneath the logic board. And then we're going to place it, and you can make sure that it's lined up with the screw holes, and that's how you'll tell that it's in there correctly. Okay, so now that we have gotten our logic board back in place, the GSM iPhone 4 is a little bit, you can do a little cheat where you can insert the SIM card. That's how you can tell the logic board's in place. Obviously, the CDMA version does not have a SIM card. Up here in this top left, the first screw I'm going to replace, you're going to want to put your little gold grounding clip. You're going to center it on there. It's the little, it's the grounding clip for the camera. Again, this phone is missing some parts because it's a test phone, so I'm not putting that in there, but you're going to want to do that before you screw this screw down. And then you're going to take your other 00 screw and you're going to put it down in this left-hand corner. That's where the other one goes. And then we're going to move to our flat blade screws, and we're going to insert the top one. And make sure you're putting these in the correct order, as the heads are a little bit different for all three of these, as they have Phillips screws that screw in on top of them in most cases. So I've got that one in there. And then we're going to insert this middle screw. And this one is a bit difficult to get in here. It might not screw in. I use my finger to guide it in right here. And then we are going to screw in our bottom one, and by this time you should be able to remove your hand from the logic board and it should sit in there pretty well by itself. And that's the last logic board screw we have to replace. And at this point we can go ahead and we can start pushing cables back down on the logic board. First one I'm going to start with is over here on the left. We're going to reconnect our little Wi-Fi circular adapter to the logic board. Now we are going to, before we do these, I'll mention it's easier to put in the camera right here since this little tab goes underneath it. If not, it's not a big deal. You can slide it underneath as well. Attach the camera cable back to the logic board. Now we're going to come over here. We're going to attach our digitizer cable. And again, these cables might be a little stiff if they're new. Our LCD cable. And then the three over here. Okay, got all those cables attached. Now we're going to move down here. We're going to wind our little cellular antenna cable back around these brackets. Sometimes it's easy to use a pry tool for this as well, to wind them back around. And then take the edge of the tip of your spudger, if you have one, and line that up with that hole. And we're just going to push that back down to the logic board as well. Okay, all those are connected, and now we're going to replace a little grounding clip for our Wi-Fi antenna. It'll just sit in here, just like you took it out. There's a little bracket that it goes behind. Okay, and now we're going to replace our shield. There's tiny little notches, help you seat it in the logic board. And make sure the screw holes are lined up. And now we're going to replace the 6 screws that you removed previously. So we're going to pause for that. Alright, we've replaced the 6 screws that hold in the logic board shield and the Wi-Fi grounding clip. Now we are going to replace our dot connector cable. So just line that up and push that down. And this one's pretty easy to see. You can tell where it lines up and where it goes. And push back down that adhesive. Okay, now we can replace the little cellular grounding clip that we removed earlier. And I'll grab that, and you can see there's a little screw hole in it. So we're going to line that up like so. And if you can zoom in right here and see how this goes back on the logic board. And this one, it's easy to use a pry tool to line it up. Let me get this in here and then you can see how it goes. That's how it gets seated. Right, like that, with the gold piece facing down. And then we're going to take the screw that came out of that and we're going to replace that screw. So you just want to be careful that you don't move that. And as you can see, it moved over to the right a little bit. I'm just going to reposition it and screw it down exactly how I want it. Okay. Now we're going to move up here. We're going to replace this logic board, or the dot connector shield. And we're going to line that up and replace the two screws that hold that in. Again, these two screws are different. The one with the larger head goes on the left. And I typically screw it in about halfway and then put the other one in so I know I'm screwing them in evenly, and then I'll tighten them both down. Alright, so got those two plugged in. Now we can reconnect our battery. If you put this tab down at this point and lift it back up. Now the easiest way to replace the battery is to go ahead and push this clip down first. Seat it in there, and then seat the battery. And then we're going to replace the one screw that holds in the battery. Okay. Now we can replace the back, and how we do this is just line it up right like this, and you pushed it up to remove it, so you're just going to slide it right back down to put it back on. As you can see, it's flush all the way around. We're going to take our security screwdriver, the 5.1, and we're just going to replace the two dot connector screws that hold the back on. And again, all CDMA models should have these security screws unless you replace them with 00 screws. And if you really don't like the security screws, you can always order 00 screws when you order parts to replace it with those. And that's how you reassemble your CDMA iPhone 4, and if all went according to plan, you should be able to power it on, and your phone should be working with a brand new LCD digitizer assembly, vibrator assembly, or whatever you replace in the process. Questions or comments? Check out our mod and DIY repair forums, where a lot of our members are more than willing to help you out if you run into issues along the way or have additional questions. Thanks for watching.